The clock on the wall showed 11:45 at night. The entire office building was empty. The lights were dim. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning system running in the background. And somewhere on the third floor, a man in a blue janitor uniform was pushing a mop across the shiny marble floor. His name was Kavi. He was 32 years old. He had been working as a janitor at this company for the past 3 years. Every single night. He came in at 9, and he left at 6 in the morning. His job was simple: clean the floors, empty the trash cans, wipe the glass doors, make sure everything looked perfect before the employees arrived the next day. Nobody really noticed him, and honestly, he preferred it that way. During the day, this building was full of energy. Hundreds of people walked through these halls. Software engineers, marketing executives, project managers, people in expensive suits carrying laptops and coffee cups, talking about deadlines and client meetings. They made good money. They had fancy job titles. They had respect. And then there was Kavi, the man who cleaned up after them. He never complained. Not once. He just did his job quietly and went home. But there was something about Kavi that nobody knew. Something he kept hidden from everyone. A secret he protected like it was the most precious thing in the world. You see, on the 15th floor of this building, there was a large conference room. It was used for big meetings with important clients. The room had a long glass table, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the city skyline. But the most interesting thing in that room was sitting in the corner, covered with a black cloth. It was a grand piano. The company had bought it 5 years ago for some kind of event. After that, nobody touched it. It just sat there, collecting dust, like a forgotten piece of furniture. Most employees didn't even know it existed. But Kavi knew. Every night, after finishing his work on the other floors, Kavi would take the elevator up to the 15th floor. He would walk into that conference room, close the door behind him, and pull the black cloth off the piano. Then he would sit down on the small bench, place his fingers on the keys, and he would play. He taught himself everything. He didn't have money for music lessons. He didn't go to any fancy school. He just watched videos on his phone during his lunch breaks. He studied the way pianists moved their hands. He memorized the notes. And then, night after night, he practiced in that empty room when no one was watching. At first, he was terrible. His fingers were stiff. The notes came out all wrong. But he didn't give up. He kept going, week after week, month after month, and slowly, something beautiful started to happen. The music began to flow. The melodies became smoother. The emotions became deeper. Playing the piano made him feel alive. It made him forget about everything else. It made him forget that he was just a janitor. It made him forget about the bills piling up at home. It made him forget about the pain he carried inside his chest every single day. Because the truth was, Kavi's life had not been easy. 10 years ago, he was a college student. He was studying computer science. He had big dreams. He wanted to work at a tech company, make good money, and give his family a comfortable life. Everything was going according to plan. But then his mother got sick. It started with small things. She would forget where she put her glasses. She would repeat the same question 5 times in a row. At first, they thought it was just stress, but then the doctors ran some tests, and the news hit them like a truck. She had a serious illness. One that would slowly take away her memory, her ability to speak, and eventually, her ability to recognize her own son. Kavi didn't think twice. He dropped out of college. He moved back home. He became her full-time caregiver. His father had passed away when he was just a kid, so there was no one else. It was just him and his mother, and he was going to be there for her no matter what. But taking care of someone who is sick is expensive. The medicines, the hospital visits, the special equipment, it all added up. Kavi took whatever job he could find. He worked at a grocery store. He delivered food. He did construction work. And eventually, he landed this janitor job. It paid decent money. It had health benefits. And most importantly, it allowed him to work at night so he could take care of his mother during the day. That was his life now. Wake up, take care of his mother, go to work, clean offices, play piano in secret, go home, sleep for a few hours, and then do it all over again. Some people might call it a sad life. But Kavi didn't see it that way. He loved his mother more than anything in the world. And the piano gave him a reason to keep going. It gave him hope. It reminded him that there was still beauty in this world, even when everything else felt heavy and hard. He never told anyone about his music. Not his neighbors, not his co-workers, not even his mother, because she wouldn't remember anyway. It was his secret, his little escape from reality. But secrets have a way of coming out. And Kavi had no idea that his life was about to change in a way he never expected. It all started because of a man named Derek. Derek worked as a junior developer at the company. He was 26 years old. He wore expensive sneakers and talked loudly in the break room about his weekend plans. He thought he was better than everyone else, and for some reason, he really enjoyed making fun of Kavi. Every time Derek saw Kavi mopping the floors or emptying the trash, he would make some kind of comment. "Hey, you missed a spot," he would say with a smirk. Or, "Must be nice having such an easy job, huh?" His friends would laugh, and Kavi would just keep his head down and continue working. Kavi never responded. He never fought back. He just let it go. Because he knew that people like Derek didn't understand what real struggle looked like. They didn't know what it felt like to sacrifice everything for someone you love. They didn't know what it meant to work through the night and still wake up with a smile because your mother recognized your face that morning. So Kavi stayed quiet. He did his job. And every night, he played his piano in secret, pouring all his emotions into the music. But Derek was about to do something that would change everything. Something that was meant to be a cruel joke. Something that was supposed to embarrass Kavi in front of the entire company. Little did Derek know, he was about to give Kavi the opportunity of a lifetime. The company's annual talent show was coming up, and Kavi's name was about to be called on that stage. What happened next shocked everyone in that room. And it all started with a single moment of cruelty that turned into something no one saw coming. Every year, the company held a big talent show. It was a tradition that had been going on for over a decade. Employees would sign up to perform in front of the whole company. Some people sang. Some people danced. Some people did magic tricks or told jokes. It was supposed to be fun, a chance for everyone to relax and see a different side of their co-workers. The event was held in the large auditorium on the ground floor. The room could hold about 300 people. There was a proper stage with bright lights, a sound system, and even a backstage area where performers could wait for their turn. The company took this event seriously. They even gave out prizes for the best performances. This year, the talent show was scheduled for a Friday evening. By 5 o'clock, the auditorium was packed. People were chatting, laughing, and finding their seats. The energy in the room was light and cheerful. Everyone was excited to see what their colleagues had prepared. Kavi was not in the auditorium. He was on the 7th floor, wiping down the windows in one of the meeting rooms. His shift didn't officially start until 9, but he often came in early to get a head start on his work. He had no idea what was about to happen. Meanwhile, backstage, Derek was laughing with a group of his friends. "I'm telling you, this is going to be hilarious," Derek said, showing them something on his phone. "I signed him up last week. He has no clue." One of his friends looked a little uncomfortable. "I don't know, man. That seems kind of harsh." "Relax," Derek said, waving his hand. "It's just a joke. The guy mops floors for a living. What's he going to do, cry? Besides, everyone needs a good laugh." What Derek had done was simple but cruel. A few days earlier, he had gone to the sign-up sheet for the talent show and written Kavi's name on it. Under the column that asked for the type of performance, Derek had written 2 words: "Special surprise." He wanted to see Kavi get called up on stage in front of everyone. He wanted to watch him stand there, confused and embarrassed. While the whole company laughed at him, in Derek's mind, it was just a harmless prank. Something funny to talk about at the office for weeks. But for Kavi, it was about to become one of the most painful moments of his life. The show started at 6 o'clock sharp. The first performer was a woman from the accounting department. She sang a beautiful song and got a big round of applause. After her, a group of engineers did a funny skit about office life. Then there was a man who played the guitar and another woman who performed a traditional dance. The audience was having a great time. People clapped and cheered after each performance. The host of the show, a friendly guy from the HR department, kept the energy high with his jokes and commentary. About an hour into the show, the host looked down at his list and paused for a second. He squinted at the paper, like he wasn't sure if he was reading it correctly. "All right, everyone," he said into the microphone. "Our next performer is Kavi, from the maintenance team." A strange silence fell over the room. People looked at each other with confused expressions. Most of them didn't even know who Kavi was. A few whispered to their neighbors, asking, "Who's that? And, is he the janitor?" Derek was sitting in the middle section with his friends. The moment he heard the name, a wide grin spread across his face. He elbowed the guy next to him and said, "Here we go." The host looked around the room. "Kavi? Are you here?" There was no response. Someone from the back of the room shouted, "I think he's upstairs cleaning." A few people chuckled. Derek laughed out loud. The host looked a little awkward. "Well, let's give him a minute. Maybe someone can go get him?" One of the security guards near the door nodded and left the auditorium. A few minutes later, he returned with Kavi walking beside him. Kavi had no idea what was happening. The security guard had simply told him that someone needed him in the auditorium. He thought maybe there was a spill he needed to clean up or a trash can that needed to be emptied. But when he walked through the doors and saw 300 people staring at him, his heart dropped. The host waved him over to the stage. "There he is. Come on up, Kavi. You're next." Kavi froze. "What? No. I think there's been a mistake. I didn't sign up for anything." The host looked at his list again. "It says right here, Kavi. Special surprise." Ah, a ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Kavi felt his face getting hot. He looked around the room, trying to understand what was happening. And then he saw Derek, sitting in the middle of the audience, laughing harder than anyone else. That's when it clicked. This was a joke. Someone had signed him up to embarrass him. Kavi wanted to turn around and leave. Every part of his body was telling him to walk out of that room and never look back. But the security guard gently pushed him forward, thinking he was just being shy. Before he knew it, Kavi was standing on the stage. The bright lights were shining directly in his face. He couldn't see the audience clearly, but he could hear them. He could hear the whispers. He could hear the laughter. "Show us what you got, janitor," someone yelled. Kavi was pretty sure it was Derek. More laughter followed. Kavi stood there in his blue uniform, holding his mop, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his entire life. This was not his world. This stage, these lights, these people in their fancy clothes. He didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. His hands were shaking. His mouth was dry. He could feel his heart beating so fast that he thought it might explode. All he wanted was to disappear, to melt into the floor and never be seen again. A woman in the front row looked at him with pity in her eyes. A few others shook their heads, clearly uncomfortable with what was happening. But most of the room was just waiting to see what this poor janitor would do next. Kavi took a deep breath. He told himself to stay calm. Just walk off the stage. Just leave. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you break. He turned around and started walking toward the stairs at the side of the stage. But then something happened. Something that no one in that room expected. A voice cut through the noise. A calm, steady voice that silenced the entire auditorium in an instant. "Wait." Kavi stopped. He turned around slowly. Standing near the front row, with her arms crossed and a serious look on her face, was a woman in a dark gray suit. She had short black hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through everyone in the room. It was the CEO. The founder of the company. The woman who had built this entire business from nothing. Her name was Priya Menon. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody whispered. The room was completely silent. Even Derek stopped smiling. Priya walked toward the stage, her heels clicking against the wooden floor with each step. She climbed the stairs and stood next to Kavi, who looked like he had forgotten how to breathe. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked out at the audience. "I know this man," she said quietly, her voice steady and clear. "And I know what he can do." Kavi's heart stopped. Priya turned to one of the stagehands standing near the curtains. "Bring out the keyboard," she said. "The one from the 15th floor conference room." Kavi's eyes went wide. She knew. She knew about the piano. She knew about the nights he spent playing alone in that empty room. But how? Priya looked at him again. And this time, there was something soft in her eyes. Something kind. "I've seen the security footage," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "Every single night for the past year. You didn't know the cameras were there, did you?" Kavi couldn't speak. He just shook his head slowly. Priya smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "Play for them," she said. "Show them who you really are." Kavi stood frozen on that stage. His mind was spinning. His legs felt weak. He could not believe what was happening. The CEO knew. She had seen everything. All those nights he thought he was alone. All those hours he spent playing the piano in that dark conference room. She had been watching. The security cameras had captured every single moment. He didn't know whether to feel terrified or relieved. Priya Menon stood beside him, calm and composed. Like this was the most normal thing in the world. She had just told him to play, to show everyone who he really was. But Kavi wasn't sure he could do that. He wasn't sure he could do anything at all. The auditorium was completely silent. 300 people sat in their seats, staring at the stage, waiting to see what would happen next. Nobody was laughing anymore. Nobody was whispering. The whole energy in the room had shifted the moment Priya had spoken. 2 stagehands came out from behind the curtain, carefully rolling a keyboard onto the stage. It wasn't the grand piano from the conference room, but it was a professional instrument with weighted keys and a rich sound. They set it up in the center of the stage and plugged it in. A small red light blinked on, showing that it was ready. Priya looked at Kavi and nodded toward the keyboard. "Go ahead," she said softly. Kavi didn't move. His feet felt like they were glued to the floor. He looked out at the audience. All those faces. All those eyes. These were the same people who walked past him every day without saying a word. The same people who never noticed him. The same people who thought he was just a janitor. Nobody special. Nobody worth paying attention to. And now they were all watching him, waiting for him to do something. His hands were trembling. His throat was tight. A voice in his head kept telling him that this was a mistake, that he wasn't good enough, that he was going to embarrass himself even more than he already had. What if he sat down and his fingers didn't work? What if he forgot how to play? What if he made a fool of himself in front of the entire company? He thought about his mother. She was at home right now, probably sitting in her chair by the window, looking out at the street without really seeing anything. She didn't remember much these days. She didn't remember his name most of the time. But there were moments, rare and precious moments, when she would look at him and smile. And in those moments, he knew that somewhere deep inside, she still knew who he was. He played piano for her. That's why he started. He used to play simple songs on an old keyboard they had at home, and she would sit beside him and listen. Even now, when her mind was far away, the music seemed to reach her. It was the only thing that still connected them. That was why he kept playing. Not for fame, not for money, not for applause, just for her. Just for those small moments of connection that made all the hard work and sacrifice worth it. And now, standing on this stage, he realized something important. He had been hiding for too long. He had been so afraid of being seen, so afraid of being judged, so afraid of failing. But what was the point of having a gift if he never shared it with anyone? His mother couldn't hear him play anymore. Not really. But maybe, just maybe, he could play for someone else. Maybe he could share what was inside his heart with the world, even if it was scary. even if it meant being vulnerable in front of people who had laughed at him just minutes ago. Kavi took a deep breath. He looked at Priya, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. Then he looked at the keyboard, sitting there in the middle of the stage, waiting for him. One step, then another, then another. He walked slowly across the stage. Each step felt heavy, like he was walking through water. But he kept going. He didn't stop until he was standing right in front of the keyboard. He pulled out the small bench and sat down. The seat was cool against his legs. He placed his hands on his knees for a moment, trying to steady his breathing. The audience was still silent. You could hear a pin drop in that room. Somewhere in the middle section, Derek was sitting with his arms crossed. The smirk on his face was gone. He looked confused, like he didn't understand what was happening. This was not how the prank was supposed to go. The janitor was supposed to stand there looking stupid. He was supposed to stumble over his words and walk off in shame. He wasn't supposed to sit down at a keyboard like he actually knew what he was doing. Derek leaned over to his friend and whispered, "There's no way he can actually play." His friend didn't respond. He just kept watching the stage. Kavi looked down at the keys. They were black and white, just like the ones on the piano upstairs. He had spent hundreds of hours with keys just like these. He knew them better than he knew almost anything else in his life. But knowing something in private and doing it in public are two very different things. He closed his eyes for a moment. He tried to block out the audience. He tried to forget about Derek. He tried to forget about all the people who had laughed at him, who had looked down on him, who had treated him like he was invisible. He thought about his mother again. He thought about her smile. He thought about the way she used to stroke his hair when he was a child and tell him that he could do anything he set his mind to. He thought about all the sacrifices she had made for him before she got sick, all the love she had given him, and then he thought about the music that had saved him during the darkest times of his life, the music that had given him hope when everything else felt hopeless, the music that had kept him going when he wanted to give up. He opened his eyes. He placed his fingers on the keys. The room held its breath. For a long moment, nothing happened. Kavi just sat there, his fingers resting lightly on the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath his fingertips. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. And then, very softly, he pressed down. A single note rang out through the auditorium. It was clear and pure, hanging in the air like a question waiting to be answered. Then another note, and another. Slowly, carefully, Kavi began to play. The melody started simple. Just a few notes, soft and hesitant, like a child taking its first steps. But with each passing second, the music grew stronger, more confident, more alive. Kavi's fingers moved across the keys with a grace that surprised even himself. He wasn't thinking anymore. He wasn't worrying about the audience, or the lights, or the people who had laughed at him. He was just playing, just letting the music flow through him like water through a river. He was playing a piece he had written himself. He had never performed it for anyone before. He had never even recorded it. It existed only in his heart and in his fingers, a secret song that he had created during all those lonely nights in the conference room. It was a song about loss, about love, about holding on to hope when everything seems dark. It was a song about his mother. And as the first few bars filled the auditorium, something shifted in the room. People leaned forward in their seats. A woman in the front row put her hand over her heart. A man near the back wiped his eyes. Even Derek stopped crossing his arms. His mouth fell open slightly as he watched the janitor, the man he had tried to humiliate, create something so beautiful that it took his breath away. Kavi didn't see any of this. His eyes were closed again, and he was lost in the music, lost in the memories, lost in the love that he carried with him every single day. He was no longer a janitor on a stage. He was an artist, a musician, a son who loved his mother more than words could ever say. And he was just getting started. The music filled the auditorium like warm sunlight pouring through an open window. Kavi's fingers danced across the keys, creating sounds that no one in that room had ever expected to hear. The melody was gentle at first, soft and delicate, like the first drops of rain falling on dry earth. But slowly, note by note, it began to grow. It became deeper, richer, more powerful. People in the audience stopped moving. They stopped whispering. They stopped doing anything except listening. The music had grabbed hold of them and wouldn't let go. In the front row, a woman who worked in the finance department felt tears forming in her eyes. She didn't even know why she was crying. The melody just reached inside her chest and pulled something out that she had been holding on to for a long time. She thought about her father, who had passed away 2 years ago. She thought about all the things she never got to say to him. And somehow, the music understood. A few rows back, a young man sat perfectly still. He was new at the company, just 3 months in. He was stressed all the time, worried about deadlines and performance reviews, and whether he was good enough. But right now, none of that mattered. The music made him feel like everything was going to be okay, like he could take a breath and just exist for a moment without carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. That was the power of what Kavi was playing. It wasn't just notes on a keyboard. It was emotion. It was feeling. It was 3 years of loneliness and struggle, and love poured into every single sound. Kavi kept his eyes closed as he played. He wasn't on that stage anymore. In his mind, he was somewhere else entirely. He was sitting in his small apartment, next to his mother's bed. She was having one of her bad days. She didn't recognize him. She kept asking where her son was, even though he was right there holding her hand. It broke his heart every single time. But then he started humming a melody. Just a simple tune. Something he had made up on the spot. And slowly, his mother stopped asking questions. She stopped looking confused. She turned her head toward him and listened. And for just a moment, there was something in her eyes. A flicker of recognition. A tiny spark of the woman she used to be. That was the moment this song was born. Kavi had gone to the office that night and sat at the piano for hours, trying to capture that feeling. The feeling of connection. The feeling of love that transcends memory. The feeling of holding on to someone even when they're slipping away. He called the song, Still Here. Because no matter how much his mother forgot, he was still here. He would always be here. And now, for the first time ever, he was sharing that song with the world. The melody shifted. It became more intense. Kavi's hands moved faster, pressing the keys with more force, more passion. The music swelled like a wave rising from the ocean, building and building until it felt like it might crash over everyone in the room. A man in the back row leaned forward in his seat. He was a senior manager, someone who had worked at the company for 15 years. He had seen a lot of talent shows. He had heard a lot of performances, but he had never heard anything like this. This wasn't just good. This was extraordinary. He looked at the man next to him and whispered, "Who is this guy?" His colleague just shook his head slowly, unable to find the words. On stage, Kavi was completely lost in the music. His body swayed gently with the rhythm. His fingers seemed to know exactly where to go without him even thinking about it. All those nights of practice, all those hours alone in the dark conference room, they had prepared him for this moment. The song reached its peak. The notes were loud and powerful, filling every corner of the auditorium. People could feel the vibrations in their chests. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. It was like standing in front of something much bigger than yourself and realizing how small you are, but also how connected you are to everything around you. And then, slowly, the music began to soften. The storm passed. The waves settled. The melody became gentle again, returning to where it started. But it was different now. There was a sense of peace in the notes, a sense of acceptance, a sense of hope. Kavi played the final few bars with his eyes still closed. His fingers moved slowly, carefully, like he was saying goodbye to something precious. The last note hung in the air for a long moment, vibrating softly before fading into silence. Then there was nothing. Complete silence. Kavi opened his eyes. For a second, he forgot where he was. He looked out at the audience, and his heart nearly stopped. 300 people were staring at him. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Oh no, he thought. They hated it. They thought it was terrible. I made a complete fool of myself. He felt his face getting hot. He wanted to stand up and run off the stage as fast as he could. He wanted to disappear. But then something happened. A woman in the front row stood up. There were tears streaming down her face. She brought her hands together and started clapping. Then the man next to her stood up. Then the woman behind him. Then a whole row of people near the middle. One by one, like dominoes falling. People rose from their seats. They clapped their hands together. Slowly at first. Then faster. Louder. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. The applause was thunderous. It echoed off the walls. It filled the room with a sound that Kavi had never heard before, at least not directed at him. People were cheering. Some were wiping their eyes. A few even shouted things like, "Bravo!" and "Incredible." Kavi sat at the keyboard, completely frozen. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. These were the same people who had laughed at him just minutes ago. The same people who thought he was just a janitor. The same people who had never even bothered to learn his name. And now, they were standing. For him, Priya Menon stood near the edge of the stage, watching the scene with a small smile on her face. She had known this would happen. She had watched Kavi play on those security cameras night after night. And she had seen something special in him. Something raw. Something real. She was glad she had trusted her instinct. In the middle of the audience, Derek sat completely still. He was the only person in the entire room who wasn't standing. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't cheering. He just sat there, staring at the stage with a blank expression on his face. His friends had all gotten up. They were applauding like everyone else. One of them looked down at Derek and said, "Dude, that was insane. I can't believe he can play like that." Derek didn't respond. He was thinking about what he had done. He had signed Kavi up for this talent show as a joke. He had wanted to embarrass him. He had wanted to make everyone laugh at the janitor who mopped floors and emptied trash cans. But instead, something completely different had happened. The janitor had just given the most incredible performance anyone had ever seen at this company. The janitor had made people cry. The janitor had made people feel things they hadn't felt in years. And Derek? Derek was the one who looked foolish now. He sank lower in his seat, wishing he could disappear. On stage, Kavi finally stood up from the keyboard. His legs were shaky, his hands were trembling. But there was something different in his eyes now. Something that hadn't been there before. For the first time in a very long time, he didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Kavi didn't know what to do. So he just stood there, taking it all in. He looked out at all those faces, all those people who were clapping for him, and he felt something warm spread through his chest. Maybe he wasn't just a janitor after all. Maybe he was something more. And maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning. The applause lasted for nearly 5 minutes. 5 whole minutes of people clapping, cheering, and wiping tears from their eyes. Kavi stood on that stage, overwhelmed by everything that was happening around him. He had walked into this room expecting nothing. He had been dragged onto this stage as a joke, and now, 300 people were standing for him like he was some kind of hero. It didn't feel real. None of it felt real. Finally, the clapping began to die down. People slowly returned to their seats, still buzzing with energy and emotion. The host of the talent show walked back onto the stage, looking just as stunned as everyone else. "Well," he said into the microphone, letting out a nervous laugh. "I think we can all agree that was something special." The audience laughed and clapped again. A few people shouted Kavi's name, but before the host could say anything else, Priya Menon stepped onto the stage. She walked with purpose, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. The room went quiet immediately. When the CEO wanted to speak, everyone listened. She took the microphone from the host and turned to face the audience. "I want to tell you all something," she said, her voice calm but firm. 3 years ago, I started this company with nothing but an idea and a dream. I worked 18-hour days. I sacrificed time with my family. I gave everything I had because I believed in what I was building. She paused and looked at Kavi, who was still standing near the keyboard, unsure of what to do. But somewhere along the way, she continued, I forgot something important. I forgot that talent doesn't come with a job title. I forgot that greatness can be hiding in the most unexpected places. I forgot that the people who clean our offices and empty our trash cans are just as capable of brilliance as anyone sitting in a corner office. The room was completely silent. People hung on every word. Priya turned to face Kavi directly. I've been watching you play for almost a year now. Every night, after everyone goes home, you sit at that piano and create something beautiful. You taught yourself. You practiced alone. You never asked for recognition or praise. You just played because you love it. Kavi felt his eyes getting wet. He blinked hard, trying to hold back the tears. That kind of dedication, Priya said. That kind of passion. It deserves to be nurtured. It deserves a chance to grow. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. She handed it to Kavi. Inside this envelope is a letter, she said. It's an acceptance letter to the National Conservatory of Music. Full scholarship. Tuition. Housing. Everything. I made some calls last month after I saw your potential. They reviewed a video I sent them of you playing, and they want you in their program. Kavi's hands were shaking as he took the envelope. He couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. He just stared at the paper in his hands like it was made of gold. You don't have to decide right now, Priya said softly. But I want you to know that this company will support you. We'll adjust your schedule. We'll make sure you have time to study and practice. And when you graduate, if you still want to work here, there will always be a place for you. Not as a janitor, as whatever you want to be. The audience erupted in applause again. People were on their feet for the second time that night. Some were crying openly. Others were hugging the person next to them. Kavi looked at the envelope, then at Priya, then at the audience. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. Instead, he just nodded, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. Priya smiled and put a hand on his shoulder. You earned this, she said quietly. Every single note. Every single note. That night changed everything. Word spread quickly about what had happened at the talent show. By Monday morning, everyone in the company knew Kavi's name. People who had never spoken to him before stopped him in the hallways to say hello. They asked about his music. They told him how much his performance had moved them. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't invisible anymore. Derek, on the other hand, became very quiet. He stopped making jokes about Kavi. He stopped making jokes about anyone, really. A few weeks after the talent show, he transferred to a different department. Some people said he was embarrassed. Others said he finally realized that being cruel to people wasn't as funny as he thought. Kavi never confronted him. He never said anything harsh or tried to get revenge. He just kept doing what he had always done. He worked hard. He took care of his mother. And he played his music. He started classes at the conservatory a few months later. It was hard at first. He was older than most of the other students. He didn't have the same formal training they did. But he had something else. He had heart. He had passion. He had a story that made every note he played mean something. His teachers noticed it right away. There was something different about the way he played. It wasn't just technical skill. It was emotion. It was depth. It was the sound of a man who had lived through hard times and come out the other side with something beautiful to share. 2 years later, Kavi released his first album. He called it Still Here. It was a collection of 12 songs, all original compositions. Each one told a story. Each one carried a piece of his heart. The title track was the same song he had played at the talent show that night, the one he had written for his mother. The album didn't become famous overnight. There was no big marketing campaign, no celebrity endorsements. But slowly, word began to spread. People shared the songs with their friends. Music blogs wrote about this unknown artist who had come out of nowhere with something truly special. Within 6 months, the album had been streamed millions of times. Critics called it one of the most heartfelt debuts they had ever heard. People from all over the world reached out to Kavi, telling him how his music had helped them through difficult times. 1 year after the album's release, Kavi performed at a sold-out concert hall in the city. It was the biggest night of his life. Thousands of people had come to hear him play. But before he went on stage, he made a phone call. His mother's caregiver answered. She held the phone up to his mother's ear so she could listen. "Hi, Mom," Kavi said softly. "I'm about to play for a lot of people tonight. But I want you to know that I'm really playing for you. I'm always playing for you." There was silence on the other end. His mother didn't say anything. She probably didn't understand what was happening. But Kavi liked to think that somewhere deep inside, she could feel it. She could feel how much he loved her. He hung up the phone, took a deep breath, and walked onto the stage. The lights were bright. The crowd was cheering. And as Kavi sat down at the grand piano in the center of the stage, he thought about how far he had come. He thought about all those lonely nights in the conference room. He thought about the mop and the trash cans, and the people who never noticed him. He thought about Derek's cruel joke and Priya's unexpected kindness. He thought about his mother's smile and the way music had saved him when nothing else could. He placed his fingers on the keys. And he played. Not for fame, not for money, not for applause. He played for love. He played for hope. He played for everyone who had ever felt invisible and wondered if they would ever be seen. Because if there was one thing Kavi had learned, it was this. No matter how dark things get, no matter how small you feel, there is always a chance for something beautiful to happen. You just have to keep playing.